When the night was closing in, I was alone and so afraid.
Hey everyone, welcome back. This is another build that's been cooking for about 2 months now. Quite a few things have changed since then, leading to significant discoveries and improvement to builds. I'll be showcasing 3 variants, being a budget and a full-fledged showcase that can take advantage of many more tricks, as well as an even more offensive-oriented version that is a bit harder to use. The main mechanics of today's video were provided by some awesome people from the Quasars clan. Testing and discovery credits get complicated, so there's no point distinguishing who worked on what. Incognito Ivara is incredibly safe to play and incredibly satisfying. Shoutouts today go to 2 Quasar members, the man's already making rounds, Dystopia, and a second lesser known but dedicated endurance runner. For more details, please check out their channels and pinned and description for some unique content. Ivara has always been plagued by issues as a weapon platform. Outside of bow builds or camp-ish setups with the dash wire augment, there was not much else run-and-gun style Ivara stuff could do. This of course was due to her lack of mobile buffs besides Prowl, and Prowl came with many penalties. A massive movement slowing modifier, and the inability to sprint or parkour without breaking Prowl and firing non-silence weapons briefly uncloaking you. This made her somewhat annoying to use for many in regular play outside of spies, while still viable for standard horde content. The biggest stick-up was Prowl being a channeled invisibility ability, but having massive energy penalties for hitting enemies with your melee. 2 energy per hit, per swing. You can imagine any good melee with range and status or hybrid-based setups in Steel Path would burn through your energy insanely fast wielding it this way. Lycath's Hunt fixes this, because the very nature of chasing melee kills will reward you with health orbs at 50% chance. This converts to energy via equilibrium, equating to 27.5% energy restored on average per enemy killed via melee. The 5 status requirement is only needed to extend the timer, and on a decent duration build can be completely ignored since you can just recast on expiration. Now you can comfortably melee enemies to death without worrying about energy drain. But it's not completely free and requires efficiency and duration balancing. An alternative subsume to consider is Molt. This is the only significant movement speed buff helmet available that massively improves Prowl mobility. Because it cannot restore energy like Lycath's Hunt can, we need to outsource our energy generation to another reliable source. This setup is much harder to run because it requires more awareness due to much lower energy generation. You cannot let combo fall off, or die, etc., else it is rather annoying to set back up. For perspective, energy will be coming from Diriga's Arc Coil precept tagging to activate Synth Deconstruct, instead of Lycath's Hunt. Lycath's Hunt can trigger on anything killed by melee influence and our direct melee at 50% rate, meaning every single kill procs Lycath's Hunt for 27.5 energy on average per enemy, assuming max rank equilibrium. Synth Deconstruct only works on enemies tagged by Arc Coil, which has a maximum range of 10 meters and limited to 7 enemies per proc. Synth Deconstruct also only has a 25% proc rate for health orbs, meaning it has less than half the generation of Lycath's Hunt. We also lose access to using Nautilus like Lycath's setup, which leads to minor loss of grouping KPM, in exchange for a much faster movement speed to get to enemies sooner for minor gain of KPM. Playstyle differences, essentially. The more advanced variant introduces 2 crucial game-changing tools for Ivara: Melee Influence and Tennokai. Both of these require access to much later game content or spending a decent amount to platinum if you don't want to unlock said content. Both drastically change build performance, which is why there are 2 separate showcases. The non-influence setup without Tennokai is benchmarked around 100 KPM and is quite simple to use with cast and forget. The influence Tennokai is slightly more involved but still very chill to play. Why is Melee Influence and Tennokai so special on Ivara? Let's look at Melee Influence first. Remember how I said Prowl has an energy penalty per melee hit inflicted on each enemy, of which we need to use Lycath's Hunt to negate? This penalty only tracks enemies physically hit by your melee. This means the spread hits via Melee Influence are exempt from the Prowl melee penalty. Not only does this mean we spend a lot less energy to kill more enemies, but because melee influence can also activate Amalgam Argonak Metal Auger on spread procs when using a dagger, it also results in quadratic scaling armor strip based off of enemies hit per swing, reducing the amount of swings needed to even kill enemies on direct hits. So we get more kills and less energy spent per direct kill. This is such a big buff that I was able to go from a slight positive energy economy at 135 efficiency to just 45 efficiency and still be overwhelmingly positive energy economy. The second tool is Tennokai. This is important because remember that Prowl gives a massive base movement penalty, cutting to just 25%. The Infiltrate augment is crucial to today's setup, allowing high strength builds to restore much of our speed, and if exceeding 400 strength because the augment is uncapped actually results in an overall speed buff instead of a penalty, since it will modify our speed to higher than 100% of original. More importantly, Tennokai allows us to use heavy attacks for free every once in a while. Use Discipline's Merit today. All other Tennokai mods suck for this build. This free heavy attack is important for activating Incarnon mode and buffs if you're using those kind of melees, but more importantly allows us to regularly activate the refreshable mod Dispatch Overdrive. This mod grants plus 60% base movement speed for 15 seconds on a heavy attack hit, adding a monstrous amount of movement speed onto Prowl Ivara. How much a buff does melee influence and Tennokai grant Ivara Prowl? We go from 100 KPM to between 160 to 180. When was the last time Ashe had KPM that high and could be invisible forever? Let's look at those Ivara builds. The first is for non-influence and Tennokai setups, if you just want an easily accessible chill Incognito Ivara. Remember, this benchmarks traditional melee around 100 KPM. This build reaches 379 strength with Molt Augmented and Matarai plus growing power snapshotting onto Prowl. Just remember that Molt Augmented requires 250 kills to max out. We need duration for Lycath's hunt, so we use Narrow-Minded as range is a dump stat today. This gives the 112 duration and 135 efficiency split build 1 is known for. Prowl drains 0.58 energy per second, tripling on parkour rolls, and 1.3 energy per enemy hit per melee swing. Infiltrate reaches 0.95 times movement speed scaling at 379 strength, and Dispatch Overdrive grants us a bonus plus 0.6. Equilibrium is mandatory to convert Lycath's health orbs into energy. Each enemy killed by our melee is worth approximately 27.5 energy, meaning 100 KPM generates 2,750 additional energy per minute to offset Prowl's hit penalties. Prompt flow is required for bad RNG on Lycath's hunt, since you will lose energy insanely fast against tankier enemies, or when mobs don't drop orbs per the 50% average. Sure-footed is just quality of life since we are invis, but still recommended to not get knocked around by annoying Xmas abilities. Arcane Strike helps many melee get better kill speed for less movement blocking from crowds. If we shift over to the melee influenced Tennokai Ivara, you will notice we have completely skipped over efficiency. No fleeting, no streamline. We don't even need prime flow because all of the indirect kills from melee influence make up the most of our KPM and ignores the Prowl melee drain penalty. Energy economy is still massively positive, so there is no need to worry about bad RNG and prime flow is skipped. Instead, we opted for Auger Secrets and Transient Fortitude, bumping up the final build to 447 strength, with Molt Augmented and Matarai plus growing power snapshotting onto Prowl. This results in an actual movement buff due to Infiltrate, granting 1.12 times movement speed modifier while in Prowl. Dispatch Overdrive grants an extra plus 0.6. Even higher duration from no fleeting means you only have to recast Lycaths about once a minute. Equilibrium, of course, is still mandatory to convert orbs, and at the lower 160 KPM benchmark, we generate still 27.5 energy per melee kill for over 4,000 energy a minute. Prime Sure-Footed should be in the Exilus, I just have polarity problems. The other empty slot is Flex, and you can even run the Dash Wire Augment here for massive crit buffs from our strength scaling, if you want to take this into killing Demless or some other whack job. For super comfort, of course, Radar, Streamline, or Flow works here too. It's really up to you. Finally, our third Ivara build is the Molt setup for Giga movement speed. The main difference is loss of the flex slot, because energy balance is delicate on this build. You need to be able to keep getting kills and maintaining melee influence active to gain more energy than you lose. You can easily lose almost 100 energy every few seconds, meaning primed flow is required to account for massive energy spiking up and down. We want our Molt speed buff to last as long as possible, so I opted for primed continuity instead of transient fortitude. Fully stacked, this build reaches 392 strength with Molt augmented and Matter plus growing power snapshotting onto Prowl. That's a 0.98 times movement speed modifier, with Dispatch Overdrive still granting plus 0.6 flat, and Molt granting a 2.96 times speed multiplier at 392 strength, lasting 12.5 seconds. This build is energy positive enough in Steel Path Survival to refresh Molt the instant the speed buff expires, but you'll see soon on why it should be free. Otherwise, the build is quite similar in play and mod choice to the 45 efficiency Lycath Hunt build too, with both being meant to be used with melee influenced Tennokai setups. If you have access to it, I strongly recommend using an Argonak Metal Auger setup with a Dagger today for melee influence. This is because melee influence taxis the Amalgam Argonak Metal Auger armor strip on its AoE and resulting status effects. This is also why we pick Gas and Electric DPS, since it will cross-chain enemies even after the AoE for additional quadratic scaling armor strip in DPS. Gas clouds also persist even after death, helping push DPS in zones against survivors faster. Our pistol can be literally anything you want. I'm not really using mine. I would recommend bringing Dexterity Arcanes on both guns, since that will be perma-stacked from your melee if you need to shoot, and it also extends our combo duration 20 seconds comfortably. You do not need to be on Airmon since this is a core melee spam build, so 20 seconds duration is more than enough. I opted for Matter to snapshot the plus 40% strength buff onto Prowl. For a melee, I chose Innodem as the foundation since Daggers can taxi Argonak armor strip. However, what's more important is to pick a melee that has good forward melee freedom. You cannot parkour or bullet jump while in Prowl beyond rolling, so something that freely lets you bulldoze forward without animation locks work best. Warfans like Gunson are perfect for this with complete freedom as the most basic choice, but other really good options also include Tonfas with say over an outcast stance on Praetos or Cronin Prime. Polearms with Shimmering Blight like Eden or Orthos Prime, among others. Of course, shot and thrown melees will also work today. Innodem is good comfort due to Tennokai allowing me to activate Incarnon form without burning combo. This grants me the free plus 40% attack speed and plus 3 meters base range, which is superb for Daggers. I also use these perks for even more attack speed so that I wouldn't have to mod any directly on the weapon. This is what frees up the slot for Dispatch Overdrive for the sweet plus 60% movement speed boost. Pointed Wind has the most freedom of movement for forward melee combo on Daggers. We go Gas and Electric like standard Dagger setups because it leads to fastest armor strip with Argonak Augment. D-ranked 1 in the 60/60s to maintain Electric is the highest elemental weight for proc priority. Weeping Wounds pushes us up to 135.3% status at 12 times combo. Prime Smite are used and are super important because they triple dip on melee influence status taxi for 3.72 times more damage on our Gas and Electric procs, and of course we'll use Condition Overload since it's a status spam build that does transfer properly across melee influence. Reach plus the Incarnon form lets us poke out to 7.8 meters, sparing nothing in our sights. Obviously bring melee influence since that is what allows Ivara to not burn through all her energy in melee Prowl. If you want this weapon to constantly activate Manifold Bond, you can drop Primed Reach for Focus Raiden to meet the 3 elemental status requirements to spread on melee influence that will all proc Manifold Bond for Corden. Our companion build today is Nautilus for the Lycath Hunt setups, to maximize the amount of free grouping, which allows us to hit more enemies per swing for faster 20 meter AoE armor strip and DPS. It also obviously drags enemies to us to kill sooner, resulting in more direct KPM. Nothing special going on, standard Corden Manifold Bond kind of build with primed radar since we kill so much. We need to know where to go next. Guardian doesn't matter since we're invisible and basic radar and vacuum. Rest of the mods are flex. Your sentinel weapon also isn't that important since this Ivara destroys 90% of the enemies before your Nautilus can even shoot them. For Molt setups, we use Diriga instead, so that our coil can be spammed via Manifold Bond to both spread status effects for easier killing, but also activate Synth Deconstruct as our main energy source, converting 25% of enemies tagged by our coil into health orb drops on kill. We also use Mystic Bond, which activates on any companion ability cast. Target switching from Assault mode and the constant Arc Coil spam both count as activations towards the 5 needed for a free ability cast. This works perfect for Molt because we only need to cast it once every 12.5 seconds for the speed buff. For the elements we want to proc with Arc Coil, it carries over elements from Manifold Bond, which inherits the mons of our Sentinel weapon. I opted for a Helstrum using this build, covering heat, radiation, and viral for ever easier Manifold Bond cooldown reductions. Fire rate is super important for Helstrum, since it shoots so damn slow. Remember, to use the build, you cannot sprint or parkour beyond rolling, but you can shoot silence guns if needed. Otherwise, just spam melee. Make sure Lycath's Hunt is active to negate the melee penalty of Prowl. Make sure to cast Molt for 12.5 seconds of speed buffs if you're using that variant. Recast Prowl when you're at 250 kills to benefit from a fully stacked Molt Augmented and snapshotting high strength with Materine. Acolyte shows up, it only takes 4 melee swings to activate a Tennokai prompt and wipe it off the map with a free 12 times combo. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% if you're not subscribed, I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible. Like I've done with the Whispers and the Wall content. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.